Before we get started with today's conversation, I'd like to first take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and nations who occupied the lands that are now the state of Connecticut. Yale University acknowledges that Indigenous peoples and nations, including the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pocasset, Neantic, Quinnipiac, and other Algonquian-speaking peoples, have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between these peoples and nations and this land. It's now my pleasure to introduce Joe Tsai, Senior Innovation Fellow at Tsai CITY, Yale alum, co-founder and executive vice chairman of Alibaba, and governor of the Brooklyn Nets and New York Liberty. It's such a delight to have him host this series. Our featured creative innovator is Olori Lolade Siyonbola. She holds her MA in African Studies from Yale, is currently pursuing her PhD at Cambridge, and is the founder of Noir Labs, Noir Fest, and Noir Press. Noir Labs' mission is to assess and analyze the needs of people of African descent. From their research, they support institutions, companies, and individuals in developing rich, intuitive, data-driven experiences and digital products for target segments of the African diaspora. While the conversation is going, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A feature here on Zoom. We'll try to answer the questions from the audience at the end of this event. So without further ado, Joe, please take it away.
Thanks, Cassie, and Olori Lolade. It's it's a pleasure to be able to have this conversation with you. I was really looking forward to it, and I was reading up on your company.
Well, I'm so honored to be here with you, Joe. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yes, absolutely. It's this is great. My first question is just, most entrepreneurs start with a small idea because of their passion, and then their idea expanded into a broader mission. I think your idea, how you started the whole Noir Labs concept, is through film, right? When you were at Yale and the Tsai CITY program made some support, and you had this idea about showing film to students, to your friends. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, I grew up obsessed with films, of course. Shout out to my mom, who had us watch The Godfather over and over again. And, and I always say that my journey began when I saw Malcolm X when I was 7 in the theater. So I have an obsession with film and with storytelling. And so, yes, while I was at Yale, I had the opportunity to help found the Yale Africa Film Festival. And so we screened a number of films, during that festival. But I had already been screening films for years before that. I think the first time I hosted a screening was probably as a sophomore in college. And I screened Sophia in London. If anybody who's watching it knows that film, it was a really huge classic Nigerian film. And so film I see as a powerful tool for bringing people together. I see it as a powerful tool for education, for enlightenment, for teaching us new ways of being and teaching us about different cultures. So I got to host a number of screenings at Yale. They were super popular and it's just a ton of fun for me.
Right. And when you were showing Sophia in London, I think it was the University of Missouri, right?
Did your research.
Oh, in research, right?
No, I said
I did. Oh, yes, I did my research. You were, so tell us about the intersection of your interest in computer science, because you actually majored in computer science as an undergrad. And then you're now in the world of art, film, media. Mm-hmm. That intersection I thought was extremely interesting. And how did you transition from computer science into kind of the creative world? A lot of entrepreneurs do that in a seamless way. I just want to hear your story on that.
So I've always been an engineer. My father's an engineer. I grew up like tinkering with things and fixing things. But I've also always been an artist. You know, I remember drawing a fashion catalog at 10 and, you know, deciding that I was going to sell all these, you know, these gorgeous fashion pieces. So the two have always coexisted within me, but I think at times it's been a battle, right? As a Nigerian immigrant, you know, we have this complex that they refer to the tiger mom complex as well, you know, in the Chinese community, right? We have very same thing.
I know everything about that.
So, you know, what I really wanted to do was like communications, but I knew my parents were not going to go for that. And so you know, I was like, well, and I liked working with computers. I had done a lot of that in high school. And so I said, okay, what is the most, you know, the degree that I can choose that will impress my parents, will give my parents some peace and make them think that I'm going to, you know, have a salary in life. And so I chose computer science, and anybody who knew me in college knew that every semester I was like, I'm changing my major, I hate this, I'm changing my major, I hate this, you know? But I think the last semester I really fell in love with coding. I fell in love with web design because that was when I got to start to be creative. I did take a lot of communications courses and writing courses. And then I moved to New York and I worked in tech, and I was a network engineer. I worked with hedge funds, and you know, I get a lot of joy out of fixing things and building things and feeling like I'm, you know, tinkering with solutions. But what really drives me is the beauty of things, making things beautiful, right? Sharing stories through the visual expression. So the two have always coexisted within me. I worked in tech, and then, you know, really for me, coming to Yale was like my freedom. You know, it was like the last, you know, ticket to get off of the you know, conveyor belt and really finally be myself. And when I got to Yale, I had the freedom and the opportunity to just explore all my ideas. You know, I got to just play around with everything and tell people, what do you think of this? And would you come to, you know, a film festival that had, you know, a shopping mart and a food, you know, experience and all these different things. And so I love bringing people together, and I saw Noir Fest as an opportunity to express all the things that I'm passionate about and share all the things that I love with people, and use that as a space within which I could help people connect more intimately and more deeply.
Yeah, so you talk about storytelling, and why is it so powerful? What's so powerful about telling the story? And your is there a personal story that you would like to tell?
You know, honestly, one of the biggest things that drove me to, you know, grad school was the need to tell my story alongside the stories of millions of other Nigerian Americans, right? I realized at a certain point, so I was born in Lagos, lived in London for a couple of years, and then came to the Midwest, to Missouri. I was raised by my mom and my stepdad. I have my three siblings who live with me and three siblings elsewhere. And, you know, we didn't have green cards. We couldn't leave the country.
Yeah, right.
And it was quite traumatic, you know, and understanding the trauma of that as I got older, because, you know, when you're a child, you don't understand it. As I got older and I saw what the toll it took on my parents, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are we going through, you know, why are we going through this? And then learning my culture, I just couldn't understand why, you know, why Nigerians had to suffer this generational gap, right? Because our parents were forced to work so hard and try to provide this type of new Western life for us. We didn't get the opportunity to really know them and them know us the way we desire and deserve. And then we're just stuck in this kind of, you know, this what is it called? The Gerber, whatever, hamster wheel.
Yes.
You know, kind of going through the motions of being, you know, of aspiring to the American dream, right? And I just saw that a lot of Nigerians were traumatized by this experience. And even those who, you know, had the freedom to travel, there's a lot of trauma with the legacy of colonialism, et cetera. And I felt that the prevailing narrative focused on Nigerian exceptionalism and how we're lawyers and doctors and engineers, but didn't really look at like our issues, you know, and I felt that our issues needed to be assessed and understood so that they could be healed, so that we could have the opportunity to become our highest selves as a people, as a culture, as a generation. And stories are extremely powerful. Everything that we, especially in African traditional culture, everything that we learn comes from stories. Traditionally, we sit with the elders and they teach us and they tell us the stories. All religions are stories. And we look at the stories and we, from those stories, determine how we should live our lives, right? Yeah. And so the stories that we consume as Westerners in this new age, they're very detrimental to our well-being, the majority of them. It's very rare and it's limited, the opportunities that we have to access stories that really elevate us and empower us, that teach us, the things that we really need to know to have a fully actualized life. And so that's why I'm so, so deeply passionate about storytelling, because I know that, stories really weave themselves into our psyche, into our subconscious, and they show us what's possible, and they teach us how to behave and what to do in the world.
Mm. So tell us a little bit about this organization that you're starting, right? It's called Noir Labs as the overall umbrella organization, and then you have projects like Noir Fest, and that's in film. I think you have a podcast. How do you? So, we're getting into this entrepreneurial area where entrepreneurs have to organize. So tell us a little bit about how you think about organizing the storytelling in different formats of different forms of media.
Okay, so Noir Lab, like you said, we are a hybrid organization. We're a social enterprise. We have a nonprofit, Noir Labs, and a for-profit. So Noir Labs Foundation and then Noir Labs Co. And under Noir Labs Co, we have Noir Fest, Portal X. Under the foundation, we have Noir Press, which is our media engine, and now we're building Black Genius University. And I saw one of your questions in the notes about, why I chose to kind of start with all of these things, right? Because most people start with one thing, and it's been a bit traumatic, right? Doing all these things at once, but also a lot of fun. I watched a video with Jordan Peterson, who teaches on creativity and creatives and the way creatives think. And he talks about how important it is for creatives to be creative, right? And one of my, compulsions is I have to constantly be creating things, right? Noir Labs, our mission is to inspire and operationalize Black liberation worldwide, and that really started, my impetus was watching Malcolm X at 7. And when I started to study, liberation movements globally, I realized that there were certain trends, there were certain things that you would see over and over. People would, make some progress, and then that progress would be lost. And then they would, another group would come in and start anew, make some progress, and that progress would be lost. We have these cycles and cycles of, of oppression and suffering that really seem to be could be preventable, right? And when I started to conceptualize Noir Lab, I think I had this is probably 2006 when I bought Exodus to Africa.org. Right? I've just learned about the brain drain and the fact that all these Africans, I'm looking at my family and how we can't go back to Africa and we're depressed and miserable. And you have all these families, who are trying to escape the continent in order to have a chance at a stable life. And I said, okay, so what we ultimately needed to go back to Africa, right? And then I started doing a lot of research and reading about Marcus Garvey. I've studied Malcolm X's journey so many times. I've looked at Che Guevara's work and Fidel Castro's work in Cuba, and just social movements, everywhere. And one thing that came, and even, Chinese Revolution, one thing that became very clear to me is that what produces lasting change is cultural shift, right? Behavioral shift, shift in belief systems.
Yeah.
And I know that you can march, we can march, we can create all sorts of activist organizations, we can do so many things, but ultimately when human beings choose that they are going to be free and that they're going to do whatever it takes to be free, then there becomes no need for any of the other things. And how do you get humans to choose the desire to be free? Is you give them the stories that help them to see themselves as free people, right? And so creating Noir Labs was a journey of so much trial and error, right? We started Exodus to Africa.org. I ended up leaving that group. Then I started the Yoruba Cultural Institute, which I knew that from learning my language and helping other people to learn their language, they would have, a strong understanding of our, ancestral heritage and have pride, and walk tall in the world, right? And be able to face anything knowing that, I come from something beautiful and valuable, and I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to share that with my children. I'm going to share that with everybody I encounter, and nobody is going to take my power from me, right? So then that was the Yoruba Cultural Institute, which evolved into the Yoruba Film Series, because we saw the power of film to teach culture, which evolved to the Nollywood Diaspora Film Series, right? I was always looking for the most effective ways to impact minds, hearts and minds, right? Culture. Yeah. And so by the time I got to Yale, I had done the Nollywood Film Series a few times. And, I arrived at Yale knowing that I wanted to create like a cultural database, a platform where you could, learn African languages, you could access, diaspora films, cultural films, and you could connect with people from the continent if you're in the diaspora, you understand? So, I always say, and that's why I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for Tsai CITY, because I always say that Noir Labs, in its true form and its current form, was born at Tsai CITY. I got to sit down with Onyeka, whose sister I'm here with right now. So Tsai CITY is super special to me because so many wonderful things have come into my life through that vessel. So really sitting at Tsai CITY and having my ideas challenged, and having them supported as well, giving me an opportunity to explore. And Yale is so great because it's such an interdisciplinary institution. And so even as an African Studies master's student, I was able to go, take classes at SOM, at the business school. I took classes in sociology. I took a film class, right? I was able to test out so many things with so many different types of people and get, maximum support. And yeah, so by the time, we applied to the, I'm like terrified, and I'm applying to the summer fellowship and just hoping that there's a possibility that we could get into it. And having that experience of really, sifting through what we're building, what are these ideas, how do we really make them profitable, who is our market, right? How do we reach our market? It's been a wild journey. After Tsai CITY, after my time at Yale, I got to Cambridge, and it was, I don't want to say it was a culture shock, because that makes it seem a bit more dramatic than it might have been. But now I was in an environment where, after having been in a place like Yale, where I was surrounded by Black folk and diverse folk who wanted to to learn more and to connect with each other. I was able to be successful in like really cultivating relationships amongst different types of Black folk and other POC, on Yale's campus. Now I was in a place where first I was tired from all the hustling I had done on campus, and in a place where Black people were just different, in the UK. And I had to really, and then when the pandemic happened, it really became about like how to connect people intimately, no matter where they are in the world. If we can't have physical events, with sort of peace of mind, how can we connect folk in ways that that are truly lasting, even from, whether you're in Tokyo, and I'm in Oakland or whatever, we can have a real true connection beyond liking my Facebook post or my Instagram post. How can we really cultivate a true connection? And that's how we landed at Portal X, which you saw the deck for last night, this morning. And so Portal X is that cultural platform that I envisioned when I arrived at Yale, where you can have all these things, where you can watch films, you can have a Norfest experience and a watch party. You can have a community room where you just share content. You can take African language classes, right? You can track your goals as an individual. We've gamified it so that, whatever you're aiming to in life, we're kind of activating you towards that and bringing you connections with people who want the same thing, so that it's easier for you to become your high self.
Well, so I got so many, what you have mentioned, I've got so many questions on that. But first, going back to the mission, because I do want to explore that a little bit. The mission of your project, your organization, is to really connect the African diaspora, and you say operationalize Black liberation. And I think I understand that in terms of the idea of liberation, which is to go back to your roots and first embrace it, because I think a lot of immigrant families come here and they want so much to become Americanized, and they say America is a melting pot, but then you realize it's actually a a mosaic of it's a quilted it's a quilt, right? It's a fabric of different things with a lot of diversity, and some parts of it may melt into one theme, but other parts they're individualized. So going back to the roots to embrace that where you came from and being proud of that, that's part of, I think that's part of liberation. But can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's important to understand the mission of the company and how you feel about it before we get into the operationalizing and all the other stuff.
An amazing question. Thank you for that question. I've spent the last year really sifting through myself, right? Really pulling off layers, getting to the core of who I am. And so our mantra at Noir Labs is liberation from within, right? We have been taught that liberation means that people pick up guns and they overthrow governments and they do all of these things, but none of those things work in the long term. They just create cycles of violence. What truly works is when each individual is liberated from within. What does that mean? Most of us do not know our purpose in life. Most of us do not have the opportunity to even access who we truly are, what we really were created to do on this planet. Most of us do not know what makes us truly happy, gleeful, because we are in this hamster wheel where we're forced to just do what it takes to survive and keep going. Right. But what I envision is a world where we have that freedom. We wake up in the morning excited to do what we love to do. Everyone is thriving, activating, channeling our gifts and sharing them with each other. That is what I believe that life is meant to be, as opposed to the fight and the drudgery of just getting by. And the only way we can activate and access that is if we know ourselves, know our history, like you mentioned. It all begins with our history. Where did you come from? Who were your ancestors?
Right.
What did you do? What talents and gifts did they have? What did they pass down to you? If you don't know that, you are walking blind in this world already from day one.
Yeah.
So for me, liberation, and so when we talk about operationalizing it, it's really about creating systems that facilitate that process of getting to know yourself, staying connected to yourself, being your authentic self wherever you are and with whomever you interact with, sharing the right? I'm a believer in, I'm a believer in Christ, and I'm a believer in, so many ancient spiritual systems, because we have a universal, there are universal laws, there are universal truths that you can't deny across the board, no matter what, faith you claim. And ultimately, as a believer, I have to share the light. To share what's good. Yeah. And I have to encourage you to share the light and share what's good and be the light. And the light is what God gave you, is what God created you to share with the world. And most of us don't get the opportunity. So I really want to create opportunities, especially for Black people, because we have been the most oppressed across the globe. Orlando Patterson, I believe is his name, at Harvard, he did a study where he taught about how, he has a book, I think it's called Black Death, or Social Death. And he talked about how no matter where you go in the world, everywhere you go in the world, the people on the lowest rung of society are the darkest skinned, right? Whereas if you look at history, the origins of humanity, the people who created the systems that we all rely on now were the darkest skinned. So how did this flip happen? We need to understand this. Every Black child needs to know the history of the world. And so that's where the portal to African intelligence comes in, right? So in Portal X, it's like, the portal to African intelligence is basically a journey where you go through, film, music, content that helps you to understand the history of the world, Black history and Black futurity, right? The history of the world from a perspective that's not just Anglo-Saxon, violence, but that really incorporates all the ways that humanity has, been woven together and worked together to create all the magnificence that we have now. So yeah, for me, Black liberation means global liberation. When Black people are free, everybody will be free, right? Because we don't have a history of oppressing anyone, on the scale of others. And so operationalizing is just like, the experiences, the films that you come and watch on Portal X, the community that you join, the challenges that you pursue as an individual and as groups to help you, achieve your goals, the educational systems, right? Creating educational experiences where children can learn from each other and learn from adults in systematized and enjoyable ways, joyful ways that are effective, measurable progress where you can actually see how you're growing and how you're becoming better every day. And, your family and others connected with you can also see that. So that's
right. So this is great. You talk about using culture to make change rather than protesting on the streets and guns and violence. And I think that's beautiful. So culture, you got film, you got art, media, you have podcast. But as we look at creating an entrepreneurial venture, the first question is, who's your customer? And when you create this cultural, feast of content, do you think about, I think it's easier first step to reach the Black audience who will have that connection, that inherent connection. How do you go across and make that story even more compelling to the general audience so that other people who are not Black who can understand that story? How do you try to do that? And right now, are you what's your, I guess the fundamental question is, who's your customer base, right? And how do you reach across?
Absolutely. So, excuse me. The customer base, I always think first of Black mothers.
Oh, interesting.
And it's there's so many people as a Black mother, and I always think of Black mothers and the challenges that we have, right? To educate and entertain our children with wholesome content, to see ourselves in content, in films, in music, in media, to access the kind of resources and knowledge that will help us to, activate our highest selves, right? And so from there, because Black women, everybody who's watching this, we all know about Black girl magic. We all know that God is a Black woman, right? We all know that the Black woman is the most oppressed person on the planet. And I believe that when we can liberate Black women and give Black women what we need, that everything else just naturally, reverberates from that. So I would say that our first, and those are the people who have supported me, the most in life, right? Everything that I create, Black women just pour love into me, and everybody else too. But the core of my energy comes from Black women. So in terms of translating to everybody, Black people, we are the purveyors of culture everywhere in the world, right? I've been to Japan and seen, the stores where they sell hip hop clothes, and I've been to, South America and, seen how excited people were to hear that I'm Yoruba. Black people being the originators of culture and of science and of, technology, we naturally have a way of leading the culture. And so whatever we do is going to become sexy enough that everybody else wants a piece of it. So I don't really, I don't really work too hard at that. But one thing I think about is how, when we tell the story of history, a lot of us who grew up in the West, the history that we were taught was very disjointed. It was a very, Anglo-Saxon history. Like, the colonists came and, the pilgrims came and then they gave the Native Americans, smallpox, but it was great. It's always like these really disjointed stories where we don't actually get to understand, okay, there were already people here. What were they doing? How did they actually interact with the visitors? What are all the different ways that all the people of the world have interacted for millennia? And so I think as we teach history and as we tell stories, even modern day stories, futuristic stories, in which you get to see different types of people and, with authentic characters, then you naturally are reaching everybody else, right? When we look at sci-fi films, futuristic films, and you see like one Black character, that's a message from the people who created the film, because in their world, in their head, that's how many Black people are in the future.
Yeah.
But as we tell stories, I mean, yes, I target the Black community, but as someone who, my first classroom in the West, in the UK, everybody was from a different country and spoke a different language. And so it's always felt global. Naturally, the stories that I gravitate towards, the projects that I gravitate towards, the art that I gravitate towards, tends to be an amalgamation of different cultures and different people and different stories, right? But my job as a Black woman, as an African woman, is to center Blackness in whatever I share.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your experience in different places, because you said you were born in Lagos, but you were very small. You were very young, right? When you moved, when your parents moved here and you grew up in the Midwest. Now are you in the UK right now? Because you're in Cambridge, right? You're taking a PhD at Cambridge. Is that right?
I'm actually in Philadelphia right this minute.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, I'm pursuing a PhD at Cambridge.
So you made a comment about how Black people are different in the UK than in America. I'm just curious because you've been so many different places, and how the context, does that change, shape the way people look at you and how you look at people? Just tell us a little bit about that, because I was curious about that comment.
1,000%. Like I mentioned to you, my issues with immigration have been a very important catalyst for my work, right? I love to travel, right? I literally at 5 years old, I go to London and I'm in a room full of people from different countries. Everybody speaks language. We had, Arabs, Asians, Indians. It was just so diverse. And I just always had a hunger for travel. And I traveled a lot by myself, right? And, as a born ethnographer, I'm always observing and noting, how people respond to me and how I'm treated, right? The first time that I began to have any inkling of racism was when I was on the playground in my school in London, and this girl was just so mean to me. There was just no explanation. She was the only, non-POC that I engaged with, and she was so mean to me. And I was like, what is wrong with this girl? But just over time, just, as I observe the way that people treat me, I go back to the idea that, as a Black woman, as the origin of humanity, I should be treated very well wherever I go. Doors should be open for me. Like people should be so happy to see me and to thank me for what my ancestors have contributed to this planet, right? Whereas, I'm met with ignorance, I'm met with disrespect, I'm met with the side eye, we experience all the nonsense. And what has helped me is that knowledge of self, that knowledge of history, knowledge of my culture. But so many of us don't have that. And so when we are bombarded with mistreatment from left, right, and center everywhere we go in the world, it's overwhelming. There's something I call the Black anxiety, right? You're constantly trying to figure out if you're safe, if you're gonna be okay in a particular space that's not created or designed for you. So absolutely, my work is really driven by the desire to see Black people celebrated everywhere in the world, to see our passport, to see a Nigerian passport be celebrated. I think I had one time I was traveling and someone looked at my Nigerian passport and was like, yes, but 90% of the time it's like, how did you get out of the country? What are you doing on my land? And you have to go through these like insane visa requirements to visit anywhere in the world. There's something called carceral mobility. I forget the professor, who coined that term, but it's the idea that even as you move in a Black body, you are incarcerated because nobody wants you there. Everybody's trying to sort of figure out how to get rid of you. And it shouldn't be that way.
So I'm going to try to get to the audience, and because the audience now is flooding webinar with tons of questions, and they're very curious. Okay, so let's talk about the product. Someone is asking, how can we follow Noir Labs? And is there an app? Is there a website? How do you think about reaching out to your potential audience?
Yeah, so the easiest thing you can do is go to norpress.org/join and join our mailing list. You can also go to portal2ai.norlab.org and ask for a pass. So we are planning on opening up the doors to the portal to African intelligence next month, right? And so in there, you'll be able to see some of the content that we've been curating. And we would love for you, if you're an artist, if you're a creator, to send us your work.
Talk about some of these different ways of engaging with your user base.
Yeah, so there's a lot of intimate connection, right? One of the tools that we're exploring now is community. We're kind of utilizing different tools for us to connect more directly with people. So we do have a newsletter,
yeah.
We do like Twitter, and we have a Slack community as well. If you're on our newsletter mailing list, and you'll be able to get access to the Slack community. But, ultimately we want to, text with our community members, and we want to bring them into a space where we can easily share content. So right now we're on Slack, and from there, we want to build out the experience on Portal X so that folks can begin to engage, through our platform.
So you're going direct to consumer. You don't need to have another intermediary to reach your consumer. You're going to be on Portal X. So for the audience here, how do they get on Portal X? Is it portalx.com? Is there a website?
So portalx.space.
Maybe we could have Tsai City here help broadcast the ways in which they can engage with your platform. So
that would be absolutely amazing. Yeah. So if you go to portalx.space, you will see the mock-up, which is the design of the vision of Portal X. And then if you go to portal2ai, which I'm going to type in the chat.
For our audience here.
.org. You can request an access code. And so from that access code will bring you into Portal X as it's being built. So what we really envision is that we're building Portal X with the community. The initial technology will allow you to, put in your profile, put in your favorites, put in your goals, and put in the kind of groups that you're looking to be a part of, and then the kind of content that you're looking for. And from that algorithm will, direct you to the people and the content that you need, and we'll continue to build the technology from there.
Talk a little bit about your team, other people that you brought into this organization to work with you. How did you recruit them, and how many are there?
We're small right now. Right now, my team, we're looking for folks. If you want to join our team, get at me. So right now it's me, and there's Uzomaka, who is somewhere here. Uzomaka Obiacha is my partner in building the new world. My daughter is part of our team, Yetunde, and her daughter. Oh, here comes Uzo.
This is
Oni's sister.
Okay.
I'm sure you must have met Oni at Tsai City, and he brought me Uzomaka. So our team has, like I said last year, things really went small, and I really had to just kind of rebuild from within. And so now we are, we're rebuilding. We're launching a fundraiser very soon, where we'll be, generating more revenue to be able to hire more people. But the journey, I've had so many amazing people along the journey. We started out with Raquel and Adirin and Osasinaga at Yale, and Davin and Faith. So many people have come along the journey and, contributed in one capacity or the other. What you see now has been built by myself and Uzo, and we have a team of developers in Nigeria. So shout out to Lanre and Aziz and Ruby. And then we have writers. So really, I think of our team as a network of people who we've tapped into as needed for different elements. And then, hopefully, as we really charge up with the development, we'll be able to bring on more of these people full time.
And it must have been a challenge with COVID and everybody going remote. are you right now, because you're still in a PhD program at Cambridge, and are you juggling between this venture and your academic studies, and how do you do that?
So I took a break from Cambridge.
Okay.
Excuse me. I took a little bit of a break, initially primarily to focus on my health, and then really recognizing that I need to get Portal X off the ground. I need to get Noir Labs profitable, and then it'll be easier to kind of go back to the PhD work. So that's how I see it now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. We have, I'm being prompted. We have time for one more question. Okay, this is interesting. There's a question about, you mentioned a book about the reversal of Black people's roles in society. Can you explore that a little bit?
Sure, there's so many. So I'm not sure if they're referring to what I said about the portal to AI and the content there. So our goal is to really help you understand, the history of the world from a Black perspective in a beautiful and creative way, right? In that portal. But as far as books, there's so many people that you can read. I highly recommend Ivan Van Sertima. I highly recommend Sheikh Anta Diop. I highly recommend Runoko Rashidi. Urugu by Marimba Ani. There's so much scholarship, so many Black scholars who, whose work has been minimized, that you can find on Amazon, you can find on Google, who have, done the great work of showing us what our ancestors.
Will you put that book list on your Portal X so that people can go to? I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be curious about your experience, and also what you've read that you think will be helpful to people in terms of understanding culture, Black people, the origins of Black people, and all that. I just think that this effort, what you're doing, is an incredibly important thing, because we all have to go back to our roots. To first ourselves, we need to understand it, and then to bridge that with our own understanding and pride, and then tell the story to get the rest of the community to understand that story. I think it's so important. So the more you are able to tell us more about what you think will be helpful in understanding your culture, the better. I think building that bridge is so important. So I see that Portal X is also a way for us to, build a bridge among the diversity of our community.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, we'll definitely share all this content on Portal X. Make sure you join the mailing list. Ask for an access code, and we'll be sending out content.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Olori, Lolade, Joe, and audience for a great discussion.